Yo, shout out to Weezy F, baby. Please say it, baby. Just got in. Let's get it. What's going on, my people here? We're talking boxing history once again. We're going to be talking the 1800s, of course. Why not? Because there's not a ton of 1800s talk going on. So that's what we're here for. That's what I'm here for. Hopefully, that's what you're here for as well. So, salute to you all. Salute to you all that will be watching on replay. Salute to those that will be tuning in here live. Well, hopefully, someone will join this thing live. But I appreciate you 100%, regardless of the situation at hand. So, once again, 86 Boxing, baby. Show some love. Show some love. Hey, I got some pretty interesting news. Some update I need to make. Is so ironic and funny, as a matter of fact. I found the Johnny Kilbane book by the great Mark Allen Baker. Can you believe that? I found it. It was in sort of like an inconspicuous spot, one that I should have looked in. And as a matter of fact, I have looked there and kind of overlooked it. Yeah, now, it wasn't without damage. Of course, I have the stain there. I have the stain. So yeah, it's one of those things. But that being said, as you can see, I'm about halfway through. I had it marked off right here. There's my bookmark. Shout out to my mom. She gave me a bookmark for Christmas or something like that. So you can see I'm about halfway through that. And of course, not to mention, I'm already in the midst of reading Jack Dillon's book here by Mark Allen Baker as well. So the two latest from Mark Allen Baker, one of the great minds of these current times right here as it relates to boxing history. You got to love it, folks. You got to love it. And of course, as it relates to Jack Dillon, the Hoosier Bearcat, the Giant Slayers from Hoosier, we are doing a giveaway of an autographed book right there. You see that? Autographed copy. Let me see right there. Autographed copy is what it says. You can read the note right there specifically. It says, Joshua, here's the signed copy to give away on your show. Let's look forward to talking to you about Jack Dillon, the great Jack Dillon, from none other than Mark Allen Baker himself, folks. So I'm going to be giving that away. All you got to do is check out the website and you can sign up here and partake, I would say. And just based on reading it thus far, I'm about halfway through, or I would say 45% through. I'll be done here at some point here in near term, of course. But that being said, man, Jack Dillon, amazing resume. Probably one of the more amazing resumes that you can ask for in the sport, especially considering where he started weight-wise and the fact that hence the name Giant Slayer. He was able to essentially slay giants. Fought up at heavyweight. Man, amazing there. But shout out to Mark Allen Baker. As a matter of fact, shout out to everyone. Shout out to those that are here now. Appreciate you all for sure. So shout out to my man Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor in the mix there. Salute there to you, Josh Taylor. Appreciate you dropping by there, buddy. People go check him out. Go check out Josh Taylor. Subscribe. Show some love right here. He's sharing good knowledge. He's in the mix here. Also, shout out to my man, Random Acoustic Thoughts, who says, big up there to you, Random. Hey, I got to touch base with you, Random. Man, ran into some work stuff and had me tied down there, Random. But salute to Random Acoustic Thoughts. I meant to send you a text earlier today, as a matter of fact. But be sure to go like, subscribe videos on the Random Acoustic Thoughts channel. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit deeper and beyond that. Because, yeah, just simply liking is one thing. But if you're into the history of the sport, if you're about boxing history, then go over here and check out some of that content. Really, the watch time, it matters for sure. Go check out some of the videos that Random has dropped over there. I think you will be intrigued because he has a lot of great content that is centered on boxing history specifically. So if you're into boxing history, you need to be subscribed to Random Acoustic Thoughts, especially if you're interested in the history around the times that we cover there, especially early 1900s. We'll delve into some of the late 1800s stuff. But Sam Langford, the likes of Joe Jeanette, Sam McVeigh, these great heavyweights, you can name them, and you'll get some information if you go check out his channel. And he's doing great research over there. So salute to my man, Random Acoustic Thoughts. Shout out to my man, Dan. Dan, the man, per usual, always in the mix here. Be sure to go check out Dan. subscribe to his channel. You'll see some of the comments that he drops a lot of knowledge there. He does some research there on his own. So salute there to you, Dan. You are 100% appreciated. No doubt about it there, buddy. And I just want to thank everyone here in the mix. So you saw the title there. We're talking 1800s. I repeat, 1800s controversial fights. We had a controversial modern fight here this past weekend. So I was looking for a subject, and that one came to mind there. 1800s controversial fights. Of course, controversial, that word in itself, it depends on what suits you as the viewer, listener, reader, user, because what may seem or what could be deemed controversial by some may not be the case for others. As I mentioned, we had a controversial fight this weekend. A lot of people lean on the side of controversy in that particular fight. But that being said, there are those who see no issue. Why? I don't know. But there are those who see no issue. Or they have their own particular thoughts as to why they feel that the sheer point of controversy didn't matter. But hey, it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. You see right here over, this side, over my shoulder right there. This is a guy that's going to be on the list right here. None other than John L. Sullivan, the Boston Strong Boy. And that t-shirt, hey, it's for sale there in the actual shop here on the channel. And I'm telling you, it's at a low price. I tried to make it as low as possible because it's about the art. But you see that sort of morphing of the old and the new right there. You got to look at the shirt and you'll understand. It's on 86 Boxing Shop there on Spread Shops. But look at that. It'll be a beauty there on you. I'll be wearing it at some point right there. There's some others as well. But you see them on the actual site, 86 Boxing Shop. But you'll see them pop up there on YouTube. Check it out. Hey, it's worthwhile right there. I think you should check it out. But John L. Sullivan, the Boston Strong Boy, the first world heavyweight champion in boxing history, most certainly was not without controversy there. As far as I'm concerned, he had a career full of controversy, both in and outside of the ring. And we're talking 1800s, and that just so happens to be the time period in which John L. Sullivan applied his trade right there. So Josh Taylor mentions Corbett versus John L. Sullivan. I don't have that one on the list, but certainly you could argue controversial in some sense. You could definitely argue controversial in some sense. Some might have their own reasons, but since you brought it up there, I would say that one of the points of emphasis based on research and the understanding of John L. Sullivan, of course, Corbett is what he is. Corbett, one of the greats, no doubt. Fundamentally sound, scientific. So we use, or so many say, which is the case for sure. But that version of John L. Sullivan in which James J. Corbett fought was most certainly not the Sullivan of old, was not Sullivan at his most formidable self in his top form. Now you could argue, hey, that's at no fault of James J. Corbett. He just so happened to get an opportunity at the time in which he was destined to get said opportunity. And that is the case there. That is certainly the case. 1892. Now that fight could have and probably should have, in theory, been against the Black Prince Peter Jackson, but hey, that's interesting. We'll talk about it there. But that being said, it was certainly an interesting time for John L. Sullivan, who had long been involved in some controversial fights, wasn't in tip-top shape in the way that he could be, or probably should have been. As a matter of fact, it took everything to get him in shape for that 1899 contest with Jake Kilrain, in which is considered to be the last bare knuckle contest, or at least world championship fight under those rules. But of course, we do have bare knuckle FC, who that is in the mix now. But you could argue they're very much different. Are very much different. Trust me when I tell you, the bare knuckle from back then is very much different from the bare knuckle of today. But nonetheless, they bear the same name. I would say they bear the same they bear the same name. But that was the last official world championship bare knuckle fight, and Sullivan, he worked with William Muldoon, who was a Greco-Roman wrestler of high fame. He eventually became head of the Madison Square Garden. So when you think about New York State Athletic Commission, he was involved. He was the top guy. He was one of the top guys there. So he had a career in boxing, trained boxers, etc. And I've mentioned it on the channel before, boxing and wrestling, they've interjected over the years in multiple ways, but especially back then you had wrestlers who trained boxers, especially when you had London prize ring rules, bare knuckle rules that were more prevalent than the Marquess of Queensberry rules during those periods, because you needed to know how to get in and grab a guy and strong arm a guy, shake him up, do what you needed to do. And Josh Taylor mentions Corbett was ahead of John L., but not to take any away. Not to take anything away, he was a powerhouse in his prime. Most certainly there. Josh Taylor's right. Sullivan was an absolute powerhouse in his prime, and that version that fought James J. Corbett was not the prime version of John L. Sullivan. So there's a little bit of controversy that surrounds that, and you could argue it was timing. There were those who actually were not fans of Corbett just in general, and even in the aftermath of such, and even him being a champion, there were those that very much discredited Corbett. They felt that his career, much like that fight, was, I guess, timed in a certain way and against the right type of individual at that particular time. But hey, as Josh mentioned, and as I will mention, this Josh can't take anything away from James J. Corbett. Heck of a fighter there in his time. And hey, he has some very good names on his resume. I've said it a number of times as well. He didn't have a ton of fights from an overall standpoint as far as career is concerned in official fights, but he made do with the fights that he had in a major manner. So most certainly he was a hell of a fighter there. Dan mentions that shell of Sullivan still went 20 rounds. That is true. This was a shell of John L. Sullivan. Make no mistake about it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. This was no doubt a shell of John L. Sullivan. As a matter of fact, if you look on the channel, one of the latest videos that I've done is on Dominic McCaffrey. And as a matter of fact, that's on the list. Before I jump into that, might as well pull up that listing that I have. And this isn't everything. This is just some that I want to talk about here specifically. Dan mentions Corbett was an awesome. Corbett was awesome, one of the greats. No doubt there, Dan. Salute there to you there, Dan, for sure sharing such, because that is very much true. But I want to show you all this listing. This is not everything, of course, but this is a little bit of something that I have here in relation to some of these great matchups. So mull that over. John L. Sullivan versus Patty Ryan on February 2nd, 1892. And I have an asterisk there. I'll tell you why here shortly. John L. Sullivan versus Dominic McCaffrey, who we're just discussing, so we'll get to that. August 29th, 1885. Jack McAuliffe versus Jim Carney, November 16th, 1887. A draw in 74 rounds. Insane, right? 74 rounds. George LaBlanche, KO 32nd round in a fight to the finish against Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, the original Dempsey, on August 27, 1889. Charles Kid McCoy, KO 15. Tommy Ryan, March 2nd, 1896. I have an asterisk there. Once we get to it, I'll tell you why I have the asterisk there. Tom Sharkey, DQ9, Bob Fitzsimmons, December 2nd, 1896. And of course, James J. Corbett versus, or no contest, Peter Jackson, May 21st, 1891. That's an interesting one as well. Very interesting. Very interesting stuff there. But there's a reason that each of these is fairly interesting in the way that they are considered to be interesting. Sure. Shout out to everyone who dropped in real quick before we dive into those. Josh Taylor, Joe Chowinski, and Bob Fitzsimmons. That would have been an entertaining fight to watch. Fitz and Fitzsimmons, or Fitz and Chowinski. Yeah, they didn't go against each other. Yeah, that would have been an interesting one right there. You had some technical degree to it. Been interesting for sure. Interesting. Good stuff there, Josh Taylor. So, Camilo Kawachi, salute there to you, Saul. Appreciate you dropping by. Says hello, everyone. Appreciate you, Saul, as always. Saul mentions Prime Sullivan versus Jeffries. Who y'all got? That's a very interesting one right there. That's a very interesting one. I've actually done a video on that, but I might digress in terms of what I actually have in that video versus how I feel now. You know, when you dive into these guys a bit more, their history, their actual fights, and research how some of them went down, it can change your mind. So check out that video, Sullivan versus Jeffries. It's on the channel there. And Saul says, is it true that Sullivan ducked Frank Slavin? Hey, I don't know if he ducked, but that fight could have happened. It certainly could have happened. But again, it was at a stage in which John L. Sullivan was in that territory of not being the formidable John L. Sullivan that we came to know, the first superstar in sports and, of course, in boxing. Cheers to Jose Diaz in the mix here. Says, hope everyone's doing well. Be sure to check out Jose. Hey, appreciate you, Jose. As always, great to have you in the mix here, buddy. Dan says, probably had 1,000 fights, bare knuckle private and exhibitions. Hey, crazy amount of fights for sure there, Dan. This being John L. Sullivan. So he was a guy that took the show on the road and ushered in some of those things we see or would have, or we continue to see with boxing and the entertainment world. So good stuff there, Dan. Ciao. Cheers to my man, Chris of Iris Boxing Descent. It says, what's up, lads? Appreciate you dropping by, Chris. Be sure to go check out Chris as well. He has some stuff on his channel. So go check out Chris. Show him some love over there. Appreciate you, Chris, as always. And hey, continue sharing. Chris always shares some good stuff there on the IG there. Follow 86 Boxing Instagram. It's on there. At 86 Boxing on everything, as a matter of fact. Hey, if you're here now, do me a favor, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, hey, that would be beneficial, I guess, to a certain degree. So why not? The majority of the viewers on this channel are not subscribed. I would say between 70 and 80% who watch the videos, and there are some where it's 80% or more on the majority of the videos are not subscribed who watch the stuff. But I appreciate you watching it regardless. So thank you. So it says, if you don't leave a like, share, subscribe, Diddy coming for you. Hey, you don't want that. I tell you that. Good stuff there. Appreciate it. Thanks for showing love, folks. So sending love. Hey, appreciate all of you here in the mix. Josh Fitzsimmons would have KO'd Chowinski. Hey, he might have. You know, Chowinski could be knocked out, most certainly. Fitzsimmons, he'd been stopped before, knocked out, of course, but Fitzsimmons, he fought at older age. But yeah, thinking prime for prime, most certainly, yeah, I'd lean Fitzsimmons as well. And Chowinski was a hell of a fighter. Chowinski, one of the more underrated fighters. I've said it 1,000 times or more, and people on this channel have shared as well. But heck, man, Joe Chowinski, I have a video on the channel. It's one of their older videos. But that being said, it doesn't do justice to just how good Joe Chowinski was. And I think he had a fairly short career that was 10 years or less. It might have been less than 10 years. I want to say it was probably 8 or 9. And man, he just look at some of the names on his resume. That's all I had to say right there. But he's one of those guys who was one of the best, no doubt, a would-be light heavyweight champion of the world, as I've stated before. So yeah, Slavin younger, as Dan mentioned. Yes, Slavin was younger. So whether Sullivan ducked him, interesting time for Sullivan. The fight could have happened, but it wouldn't have been the best of Sullivan. I will say that it wouldn't have been the best version of him that was out there, and Sullivan might have lost. He could have caught. Slavin for sure. But that being said, he He might have lost younger, bigger. Would have been a lot to deal with for Sullivan at that particular period in time. So the fight didn't happen, but I don't think it was really ever truly serious. There were a number of fights that didn't happen that never reached that sort of serious stage with Sullivan. I have books on this. You're correct. Cheers there, Jose. Good stuff. Good stuff. Wait, didn't Fitzsimmons KO Chirin? I remember seeing it on Box Rate. Yeah, that might have been the case. I was trying to think because when it was brought up, it made me think. I got to double back. I'm trying to remember here off top. Josh, you have an accurate account of the Jackson versus Corbett fight. I remember seeing a newspaper in a forum where it stated that Jackson got robbed. So interesting. That's 8. That's what I've seen as well. There are different versions or iterations of it. Some people have their own interpretations of it, for sure. We're going to talk about that one right there. So I remember that one. So if y'all could pick a legend from the 1800s, who would you pick to train with or under? That's a very good question there, Josh Taylor. That is a very good question right there. Ponder that, people. Do ponder that. Damn, more than 40 years around with two greats like Jackson and Corbett. Hell of a fight. Certainly. Cheers to Rodolfo Rivera Jr. Drop by showing some love right there. Be sure to check out Rodolfo as well. Doing his thing there. Appreciate you there, Rodolfo. Thanks for dropping by as always. So it says, yeah, it's true that Sullivan in those times was out of his prime. Drink addiction ruined his skills, sadly. Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get to see the best of John L. Sullivan with that in mind. So, yeah, we suffered from that, and maybe we'd have more footage of him, as a matter of fact, if we would have gotten the opportunity to see a bit more of him. So we're going to start this out with John L. Sullivan versus Patty Ryan from February 2nd, 1882. Retired 9. So Sullivan retired in the corner, or not Sullivan, but Patty Ryan retired in the corner at 9. I put that one on here. Why? I put it on here. Why? Because it's one of the more interesting contests there. This was the contest that really made Sullivan the marquee name. This was under bare knuckle rules. So they weren't gloves. This was with the fist, of course. Bare fist. Not unlike the bare knuckle of today, where you at least have some little wraps there around your hand. These were just bare fist in general. And I put an asterisk there because it could be considered controversial for some versus others. Now, the fight in itself went down as it officially went down. 9th round retirement by virtue of Patty Ryan retiring in his corner on his stool. Now, of course, given the rules that this was under, when you think about those bare knuckle fights, and you see some of the rounds tied to them, the way it worked was if a fighter hit the deck, then that ended the round. And usually they went back to their corner for a 30-second rest. Then they'd be back out. So if they came out and it had been going for 20 seconds and the fighter was dropped again, okay, that the end of the round would have commenced then and there. So that's what you have to have the understanding of when thinking about some of those old bare knuckle contests that went down. And that was, of course, the case here. So when you think about the bare knuckle contest just in general, or mention of London prize ring rules, this was generally what was in play here as far as when they hit the deck, that constituted the end of a round. So in this Sullivan versus Patty Ryan contest, that's what was at play. It went 9 rounds. And where the controversy comes in is whether or not Patty Ryan was at his best. Now, it said that he wasn't. Now, Patty Ryan apparently had a hernia, and he didn't want to cancel the fight or pull out of the fight given the magnitude of such, because Sullivan to that point had built up himself, and he was no doubt a formidable opponent here in the mix. And he was a guy who was regarded as one who would be essentially next, one to watch, one that would be on the come up, and one that you would have to pay attention to as time went on. And so, given such, Sullivan and Patty Ryan, it was inevitable that they would ultimately meet. Patty Ryan was the older fighter, of course, and Patty Ryan got his trade or applied his trade and is most associated with that world of bare knuckle, though he did have a few boxing fights. I have a video on the channel. It's not very long. I am talking in the video, but I only went over the boxing fights primarily for Paddy Ryan, which is only a handful at most, because a lot of his work went down in the bare knuckle world. But that being said, he had a hernia, and it was stated that his truss came loose, I believe, in the first round, which he had around his stomach, and that really weakened him or whatever. And this happened because he got dropped, or somehow he went down, but I think he got dropped in that first round or whatever it may have been. And that's where that came into the fold. Now, it was stated that Paddy Ryan looked very pale, and it was known coming into it that there was a little bit of something off with him in that sense. But he fought the fight as he would have fought any fight just today. On that particular day, the better man won, and that was none other than the younger, fresher, stronger, bigger punching John L. Sullivan was that man. Now, would it have been different with the healthier Paddy Ryan? That's where the question comes into the fold. Now, the two were no strangers to each other thereafter. They had some Marquess of Queensberry rule contests, generally that type of stuff. So they met on more than one occasion, with Sullivan generally getting the better of him. As mentioned, Paddy Ryan was the older fighter, and of course, Marquess of Queensberry rules fighting wasn't his direct trade. I do wonder how it would have gone had it been a 100% healthy, or as close to that healthy version of Paddy Ryan taking on the young, fresh and up and coming Sullivan. It may have very well gone a similar way, maybe to win a little bit longer, and Sullivan would have taken them out sometime a little bit later in the contest. But that being said, it does make for interesting pondering, as it relates to what could have been potentially done had the two met on equal terms as it relates to their overall health. I don't know. Paddy Ryan, he was known to be a formidable fighter in his day, known for his power. That being said, it could have been a changing of the guard in that sense, This was 1882. So Sullivan was younger and fresher into his career, as mentioned, and he was that guy. We've seen it on a number of occasions where those young guys have sort of that trajectory that is in place and the thoughts surrounding them. And that was the case with Sullivan. So I do think that it might have been a similar type of outcome, probably a little bit later, but nonetheless, a similar type of outcome. From all indications, Sullivan would have been the faster fighter for sure. And Sullivan would have been very aggressive, as he was looking to make a statement. He understood the magnitude of this contest, given where he was trying to get to trajectory-wise. So very interesting one right there on the controversial list, but definitely share your thoughts in that regard. So I'm going to check out some comments real quick. Saul mentions, I didn't know that Paddy quit in the corner. Yes, he did. He did. It was in the 9th round. It was over. Basically gave it up, retired on his stool. I swear hearing that he got KO'd. Essentially, it turns into a KO in some sense in that regard. Yes, that Sullivan advocates for gloves instead of bare knuckle. Yes, he did. He did. One of the true fighters to usher in the Marquess of Queensberry rules era. Now, in that contest with Paddy Ryan, he got into trouble, and it wasn't supposed to happen. Governor, I know his last name was Lowry, who was the governor of Mississippi that time. He had it out for Sullivan big time, and he wanted to lock Sullivan up. And they would cross paths again in 1889 when he fought Jake Kilrain. So Sullivan didn't want to do bare knuckle because of the fact that it got him in so much legal trouble. And trust me, this was legit legal trouble, like where you had actual warrants for the arrest of these fighters here. And Sullivan just so happened to be involved in two of the more high profile ones. This one with Patty Ryan, and then of course that one with Jake Kilrain. And after the Kilrain contest, he was apprehended. He had to go to court. They let him out. He was supposed to return, and he basically skipped out on his court date. But that meant, hey, he couldn't step foot in Mississippi, and I don't believe he stepped foot in Mississippi again from there. But it was serious in terms of the trouble that came with that bare knuckle fighting. Damage as Fitzsimmons did fight Chowinski went down as a draw because Fitzsimmons was killing Chowinski and one stop did so rule the draw. Okay, good stuff there, Dan. Couldn't recall that off top. I had to look back into that fight. I know a video on both, of course. But hey, crosses your mind or passes you by sometimes. Cheers to Rock Talk True Crime. Hey, appreciate you dropping by there, Rock Chalk. Be sure to go support Rock Chalk and check her out. Be sure to like and subscribe, especially if you're in the true crime, because she's doing it real time. And there's something cool about that just in general, but she's real time making things happen in that regard. So major shout out to Rock Chalk True Crime right there. Appreciate you there, Rock Chalk. Thanks for dropping by. It's always good to have you. And showing love to the sport of boxing. We got to show love to true crime. Hey, and she knows about some things that have happened in the boxing world. One of them last year that was a true crime that is pretty crazy. Saul says, oh, Patty was sick when he fought Sullivan. There was a hernia type issue that was going on. So it was something that hindered him somewhat. So that wasn't the version of him that was 100%. How much of a difference would a more healthy Patty made? That's still to be questioned there. Sullivan was still going to be a force. Hey, appreciate the thumbs up there, Rock Chalk. You're great. You're so great there. Appreciate you as always. Be sure to check her out, folks. Real talk. Go subscribe to Rock Chalk True Crime right there, showing some love. Hey, we spread the love on the channel. We appreciate everyone. And Rock Chalk, when we're talking true crime, she is the person for that, no doubt about it. You know, I'm not a huge true crime guy, but I've tuned into her stuff because it is fairly intriguing. And it shed light on some things for me. And as mentioned, she's covered some boxing things as well. And it's getting me, it's wrapping me in, pulling me in, you know, just slowly, just pulling me closer and closer to the mix there. So appreciate you, Rock Chalk. You are appreciated. Yes, indeed, there, Saul. Yes, that's what happened right there. He says, I thought Patty was on a good moment. Damn, yeah. It wasn't the best version of Patty there. If Patty didn't have the hernia, do y'all think he could have beat Sullivan? That's a question right there. So I don't know. Hey, it's one of those things where you have the old wily vet who is probably on the back nine of their career versus the young stud who's on the front nine. Things can happen. Certainly isn't 100% predictable, but it is a young man's sport that we can say. But experience that plays a good dividend right there. So it makes it very interesting. Josh Taylor mentions all these legends were amazing in their own ways. They all deserve respect, especially for those who keep improving their sport and showing they had heart and guts. No doubt about it, Josh. No doubt about it. We have to show those guys love. Who better to show it than us here who love to delve into history? So appreciate y'all. The second one I have up here is John O'Sullivan versus Patty versus Dominic McCaffrey, August 29th, 1885. And it was a points decision for John O'Sullivan over 6 rounds, but there is controversy there. Now, of course, for those here, some that may have checked it out, and of course, if you haven't, do check it out. There's a video on the channel chronicling the career of one Patty Ryan. He fought John L. Sullivan on that particular day in 1885 for the American heavyweight title. You've heard me mention this in some other lives, but basically, John L. Sullivan was the American heavyweight champion, but by some standards, the world heavyweight champion. The interesting thing associated with that is when he fought Patty Ryan for that bare knuckle championship, there's an element, a hinge of that could be considered the world heavyweight championship because the belt was exchanged through the world of bare knuckle at that particular time. So there are some who deem him as the world heavyweight champion, and plus he was undefeated, and I guess you could say on a tear. Now, from an official standpoint, I guess it all depended. So the National Police Gazette, they did not recognize him as the world heavyweight champion. You could argue that they had some fish to fry in the whole process and probably had a disdain for Sullivan, which they did because the owner of the National Police Gazette, Richard Kyle Fox, and Sullivan were staunch rivals. Sullivan essentially was pretty harsh and kind of nonchalant. I guess you could argue disrespectful with Richard Kyle Fox, who never really forgave him for such. And therefore, as time went on, especially throughout those 1880s, you're talking about two guys short of actually stepping in the ring themselves and actually fighting with fists. They were fighting in other ways, and they were sharing jabs through the media, etc. And essentially, Richard Kyle Fox, he backed Paddy Ryan in that contest against John L. Sullivan for the bare knuckle title, or what could be considered the American bare knuckle title, or depending on who you ask, the world bare knuckle title. And it just so happens that that kind of ends up being where the point of controversy comes in terms of Sullivan's reign. But that being said, when Sullivan fought McCaffrey, it was, by my research and understanding, an American heavyweight title contest. And there are different iterations or versions of what happened. In the video, I kind of just go with the one. I center on one, though I mentioned kind of two that were involved in the process. But essentially, John L. Sullivan and Dominic McCaffrey, they fought for 6 rounds. And in this 6-round contest, they shared moments. It was Sullivan who, at that time, even in 1885, was getting on the higher end of weight. He was over 200 pounds in this contest. For Dominic McCaffrey, he was in the 170 range, from what I recall. So 170. So just imagine a legit heavyweight versus a light heavyweight. And this was kind of some of the early signs of Sullivan as far as him starting to slip and slide as related to his attention to training and what he was doing in the sport overall. But essentially, they fought. Each had their moments. Now, of course, the harder shots were going to naturally come from the bigger guy, that being John L. Sullivan. But the more clever technical work came from Dominic McCaffrey. Now, it ended up being a loss for Dominic McCaffrey when it was all said and done, as the referee regarded it as a points victory for John L. Sullivan. But the controversy comes is because where the controversy comes, because there were some sort of misinterpretations on what the actual rule set would be, or what the actual fight plan that was in place would ultimately be agreed upon between the two. It was said that Dominic McCaffrey was under the understanding that if he were to be standing after 6 rounds, it would thus be a victory for him for having stood 6 rounds with the American and, by some standards, world heavyweight champion. And there was also mentioned that this was not an agreement in place by John L. Sullivan, who viewed it as just being a contest where he was going to be competing for 6 rounds. And that was it. You know, there was also some controversy surrounding whether it was a fight to the finish, or whether it was supposed to go beyond 6 rounds, something in which Dominic McCaffrey wanted to do, but John L. Sullivan did not want to go beyond 6 rounds because, as he understood it, it was supposed to be 6 rounds. Now, the referee did say that he was not aware of an agreement for the contest to be anything other than a 6-round, he called it world heavyweight contest. So that made it a bit controversial as well. Now, also there is mention that there was actually a ruling that McCaffrey had won the contest, and that was because the crowd was very raucous and loud. Now it was a pro McCaffrey crowd, but them seeing that he had stood the 6 rounds with Sullivan, of course, they celebrated and all, and you couldn't really hear the referee. So some thought that McCaffrey was given the verdict in the contest. Then there were thoughts that it was a draw as well. And of course, with that draw, just that being the case, that ends up being a virtual win for McCaffrey. But the referee did come out later saying that it was intended to be, or he had given a contest to Sullivan on a points win, but there are still those who actually mentioned it. I referenced some of these articles in the actual video on McCaffrey, that they viewed it as a McCaffrey win for this particular contest. And that's regardless of the controversial verdict ruling or whatever it may be. But what they saw and deemed was McCaffrey got the better of John L. Sullivan in this particular contest, which makes it very, very interesting, especially the dynamics mentioned where Sullivan was 200 plus pounds, McCaffrey about 170 something, mid 170, somewhere in that range. And at that particular time, McCaffrey, he's a very good fighter, especially relative to that particular time frame. He was known for his skill set. The common opponent, of course, was Patsy Cardiff. They fought an exhibition. He was said to pretty much get the complete better of Patsy Cardiff. I didn't include that in the video, though I did have a mention that I edited out. But Dominic McCaffrey, heck of a fighter, a very technical fighter who held it down from Pittsburgh, one of those Pennsylvania fighters. Pennsylvania, man, you'd be hard-pressed finding a greater set of just fighters historically in numbers coming out of a different place other than that of Pennsylvania, man. It's pretty crazy when you think about it, especially when you factor in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia together. That's got to be like the greatest fighting state compared to all states in the history of the sport worldwide. There were some that would give it a run for money, but I can't think of one that's better. England, of course, they've had some great fighters. Wales, they've had some great fighters. There are certain states in Mexico that have had some great fighters as well. But Pennsylvania, for my money, is number one. We're talking state in general. So, yes, I will mention that McCaffrey-Sullivan fight smells fishy. Certainly some fishiness down there or surrounding it, Saul. There was certainly some fishiness there. Jim Corbett came out with an article, and I mentioned it in the video, stating that there was a Sullivan win. This was some years later. This was might have been the 1900s, either the 1890s or 1900s. I think it was the 1900s, saying that he was there, and the rumors of an extra round. That was another thing that was mentioned, that, hey, an extra round was granted, and the two competed in that, but it turned out to be not false. But a lot of controversy surrounding that contest. And as mentioned, you look at some of the articles and references. There are those that think that Dominic McCaffrey won that contest. They feel that Dominic McCaffrey actually beat John L. Sullivan on that fateful day when they fought there in 1885. There's only one picture of the contest. And if you look up if you search one of the search websites, John L. Sullivan versus Dominic McCaffrey, you'll see it. I'm sure you've seen it. It's in the video as well. But there's only one picture from that particular contest. But it's amazing that we have it. And it's one where McCaffrey is on the ground. Now, in reading the round by rounds from the fights, he wasn't knocked down in that sense. I think it was more so to do with him kind of being pushed down, just based on what I read and what could be associated with it. But very interesting, though. Very interesting. Cheers to Alexander Kemmel. Shout out to my man Alexander Kemmel. Viva Ukraine there. Salute there to you, Alexander. Always great to have you in the mix there, buddy. He says, read Adam Pollock's 2 books on Sullivan. Gives round by round from many of the fights. Okay, awesome. I got to check those out. I do have his book on Jack Dempsey over here. I still need to crack it open, but I got 2 that I'm tackling at the moment. I'm going to get to it, though. But I will need to check out the ones on Sullivan. I do have the Christopher Klein book physically and via audio book. Great book. Gone through it numerous times. John L. Sullivan. But no, good stuff there, Alex. Appreciate you dropping by there, buddy. Hey, show some love to my man Alex in the mix here for sure. So says, I see that fight kind of like better be a Bivol 1 from what you tell us. Hey, I guess you could argue such. Depending on what you like, what you saw. But yeah, stronger fighter, no doubt. Sullivan, the craftier, more boxer. That was definitely my man, Dominic McCaffrey. But again, thank you, folks. 86 Boxing here. We are live. We're talking controversial boxing fights of the 1880s generally. Be sure to visit 86boxing.com if you want to try and get that book that is autographed by none other than the great Mark Allen Baker, boxer, historian, contributor, the 9. Let's see here. We have Jack McAuliffe draw in 74 rounds with Jim Carney, November 16th, 1887. This is a very interesting one right here. Jack McAuliffe is the first world lightweight champion recognized in boxing history. Now, he retired undefeated. He had some draws that were tied to his record, but generally speaking, he retired undefeated. And yes, you saw that right. 74 rounds. These two were going at it here. And you have to understand that, of course, we transitioned largely during that period. It was still an ongoing evolution to Marquess of Queensberry rules fights that were gloved, even at times that would have very thin gloves. Some may have been 1 to 2 ounces, but nonetheless gloved. But that being said, Marquess of Queensberry rules. But McAuliffe versus Jim Carney, who was a damn good boxer from that particular period, who is not a huge name as it relates to current order, but was a damn good fighter and one who was a threat and a challenge for many during that particular period. So I wanted to mention this fight because it was very much controversial. As mentioned, Jack McAuliffe was undefeated as far as what he retired at with his record. It might have been around 40-ish fights, somewhere around there. Now, the controversy comes is, of course, as those rounds wore on, Jim Carney started to get the better of McAuliffe there at the tail end. And I have a video on the channel of Jack McAuliffe, and I have a shorts video. I would say check out that shorts video. It specifically talks about this fight, and it's under a minute. It was at the time that shorts could be no more than a minute, but it specifically talks about this one. But basically, when we got around to that time of the 74th round, McAuliffe was about to be stopped from all indication on what was read, etc. McAuliffe was about to get stopped. Let me pause this real quick. Saul says, wonder did Dominic fought many middleweights of those times or fillers, hell, even welters. Hey, he started out in that kind of middleweightish range, so he was a formidable guy. He fought Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, lost to him. So, yeah, he's got some other solid names on the resume. Definitely check out that vid there. So Alex says McAuliffe Carney fight was with skin tight gloves. Good stuff there, Alex. As mentioned, yeah, skin tight gloves. There were no stranger to that. So that'd be like just taking a pair of little regular gloves that you may have, driving gloves, some freaking winter gloves, even though those usually have more padding. But yeah, they were no stranger to these skin tight gloves, and they're considered to be a gloved match. You know what I'm saying? So damn close to being bare knuckle there, as you can imagine. But yeah, skin tight gloves. They're noted by my man Alex. But yeah, 74th round, McAuliffe looked like he was about to get out, about to go out, and Carney was about to get him out of there. He had the upper hand, was landing. And then some people from McAuliffe's corner stormed the ring, and therefore resulted in some of Carney's corner and patrons, compatriots, whatever, some of his fellow supporters, you name it, storming the ring as well, and absolute melee ensued. Man, I wish we'd have had some of these things on video. We seen real time melees, etc. Not that I'm advocating that specifically, but if it happened, it freaking happened. But I wish we would have had some of this stuff on video. But an absolute melee ensued right there in the ring. You had both sides and their supporters going at it, and ultimately police, etc., had to step in. Police, other officials had to step into the ring and actually break up the contest. And the unfortunate side of it for McCaffrey, or not McCaffrey, sorry, but Carney, is the fact that he was this close to ending the reign of one Jack McAuliffe. He was this close to ending the reign of McAuliffe, and the fight was ultimately ruled a freaking draw. Now, because of this melee, them hopping in, etc., the fight was ruled a draw. So, despite the fact that Jim Carney had taken the latter stages of that contest, it basically had Jack McAuliffe, the Napoleon of the ring, great boxer, especially from a technical standpoint, had him all but out essentially before they jumped in. The fight was ruled a draw, and therefore McAuliffe kept his world lightweight title, and in addition to such, kept his undefeated record, which is pretty freaking. It's a shame. It's a shame. You know, controversy in boxing as long existed. So we see some of the stuff today, but trust me when I tell you that controversy in boxing has long existed far beyond these particular times. So that is something you should know. But think about that. You get this shot, this opportunity, and you have the champion on the brinks. His people jump in. And as a result of such, you're punished by virtue of it being ruled a draw. Especially after that time. 74 rounds, folks. 74 rounds. 74. So that's not cool, man. I had to put that one on this list because it's like one of the damning examples of controversy in the sport right there. And as mentioned, hey, you can go look it up. I have a video on the channel, but look up the record of McAuliffe, and that was probably the most challenging contest, the closest, I would say, from what I recall, because I haven't dove into him in a while. But from what I recall, I believe that was likely the most challenging contest of his career overall when that happened there. So very interesting. I would say very, very much interesting. So, you know, those are the types of things you have to take into account. So who says, damn, those wild times, I bet the brawl is bigger than the McGregor versus Khabib one. No, most certainly. You hear about some crazy brawls. Tough numbers, Saul says, Dan, yes, indeed. You hear about some crazy brawls from those times. This isn't just the only one. But yeah, absolute melee. In the McCaffrey video, I speak of matter of fact, since we were talking about McCaffrey just prior to this, him and Sullivan's team. Well, McCaffrey was fighting this guy named Pete McCoy, but a brawl ensued. Sullivan just so happened to be working the corner of McCoy, and speak about a brawl. And John L. Sullivan, who's the world heavyweight champion at the time, well, at least American heavyweight champion, is getting in there decking some of freaking McCaffrey's team members or whatever who jumped in the ring. It's crazy, man. They were wild. They were freaking wild for sure. That's what I say. Alexander mentions another fight between champions of England and America. Says Heenan, London Prize Ring rules, crowd stormed the ring. It was declared a draw. Says and Heenan. I know Heenan and Says. I'm trying to remember. Do I remember that fight? Yeah, I don't remember the fight there, Alexander. But dang, I believe you there for sure. I have to look into that one. I had to look into that. Yeah, there have been multiple instances where that has freaking happened there. And it was a regular occurrence depending on the stipulations and situations back then. Guys would step in. Hey, they knew kind of the signal. They knew the point of virtue, the order at hand right there, because certainly having one of those titles, just as it does today, it means something. It means a lot, even to this day, even in this four-belt era. There's certainly a difference between a non-titleist or someone who doesn't have a title versus someone who has a world title. Regardless of the times, there's a difference there. I know we speak of going back to the undisputed one-belt era, which would be cool and all, but even in this four-belt era, there is recognition there. So that is something that you'll see many want. Now, some get to a status where they can afford to, ditch the belt or say, you know what, I'm not going to defend it against X because, hey, I'll be all right. But that being said, there's something that comes with that world championship status there. Good stuff there. Alex So says, absolutely, Dan. Very tough hombres. Indeed there. Then says, Alexander, heard about that. Yes, indeed. Yeah, Heenan, can't think of his dang first name. But yeah, I had to dive into those guys a bit more. So says, Tommy Ryan said in those times to be a champion, you had to knock out, sometimes beat him up badly. Yes, indeed. Hey, I have a Tommy Ryan video on the channel there, Saul, and I started out the video with that particular quote where Tommy says specifically, back in my day, to be a champion, you had to knock a man out. And I wanted to put emphasis on that because that very much was the case there. Heenan was tough, says Dan. Dan mentions, so Tommy Ryan won title in the 76 round war with Danny Needham. Yes, indeed. Marcus of Queensbury rules there, folks, as well. I think it was like 7 hours and some change. From what I recall, 7+ hours of fighting, gloved. I forget how big the gloves were, but they weren't that big. Marcus of Queensbury rules. 3-minute rounds, that is, folks. 7+ hours of fighting there. Danny Needham fought for another fight of 100 rounds, longest in history. Danny Needham was tough. I heard he was also a pimp. Oh, wow. Interesting, the pimp one. Interesting, the pimp piece. I had to look into that. I didn't look into Danny to that degree right there, but that's very interesting there, Dan. That is very interesting. Saul says he remembers that one. Yes. So Saul, there's a Tommy Ryan video on the channel. I suggest checking it out. One of the greatest boxers in history. And man, there's some you can throw in this category, but I would say there are few who actually could be deemed worthy of such. But when you talk the most underrated fighters ever, as far as those that are worthy of being deemed such, man, Tommy Ryan is one of those. Arguably the greatest fighter ever. Check out that video there. If you haven't, so I recommend it. Man, it's on the channel. Tommy freaking Ryan. No doubt one of the greatest fighters ever, arguably the greatest fighter ever. And I think some light will be shed in that regard. Much like those of his time, they weren't afraid to fight well above their weight class, man. Got to give it to these guys there for sure. Dion Club, shout out to my man Clubber D, says 7+ hours of fighting. Dear Lord, salute to you there, Clubber D. Be sure to go check out Clubber D, folks, for the Ball and Buds podcast. My man Clubber to the Z. Appreciate you there, Clubber D. As always, be sure to check him out. Subscribe to his channel there, Dion Clubs. Hey, you can drop the link in the mix here as well there, Dion. Matter of fact, that's my guy right here. We're in the same area. Ran into him at a podcasting event a little while back. Hey, we were the two combat sports guys, that were there in the mix. And hey, the rest is history there. The rest is history. I'm going to check it out for sure. Tommy Ryan is so damn underrated. Yes, Saul, one of the most underrated fighters in the history of the sport. In the Rocky Marciano video I dropped here recently, I mentioned that Ezzard Charles is arguably the most underrated fighter in the sport. He's certainly one of them. Tommy Ryan, similarly, just fighters that were just so freaking great that for some reason they just routinely get overlooked, not even mentioned. When you hear a list of great welterweight titles, you'd be hard pressed to find someone put the great welterweight champions. You'd be hard pressed to find someone put Tommy Ryan on it, which is baffling. And that's why the thumbnail says, or the title, one of them says, if you don't know Tommy Ryan, then you don't know boxing, because there's no way you should be making a greatest welterweights of all time list and not have Tommy Ryan there, though he did his trade at middleweight as well. Former world welterweight and middleweight champion, so you could put him in the mix there, middleweight as well. But that being said, he was generally around the size of a welterweight, and then he would go up to be what would be a 154-pounder super welterweight today. That being said, there's no way there should be a list of the greatest welterweights in history, and I guess you could say middleweights in history as well, and Tommy Ryan not be on there. It's baffling. It's freaking baffling. Dan mentions Tommy Ryan is so great. Yes, indeed. There. So says he deserves a master boxer who taught Jeffries' crouch style. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Yeah, Jeffries, man, he learned a lot from Tommy Ryan. As a matter of fact, I mentioned Jeffries in a video for some training situation that were going down there. And Jeffries owing Tommy for some training. So it says, and I heard that Chowinski thought that Ryan would have flattened Greb. Holy, yeah, hey. The better boxer was no doubt Tommy Ryan. Greb, he was so unique in his own right and attributes and all that stuff that it would have been an interesting one. I can't say with 100% certainty who would have won, but I could see both winning. Tommy was a master boxer. Greb, he doesn't have a ton of losses. He doesn't have a lot of losses. He was beaten. He was outpointed at times, but you had to be damn good. Billy Misk was able to, or am I thinking of Michael? Who's it? Michael Dow, whichever one was the first to give him a shot at the potentially winning that title. Not the middleweight guy that he won it from, but I think it was Michael Dowd. But Michael Dowd fought him and didn't want to give him a rematch. I think it was Michael Dowd. This is one that I'm thinking about specifically. He did fight Mix too, but I'm thinking about the Michael Dowd fight, I'm pretty sure. So interesting. Manager of Jeffries too, fought exhibitions until the 50s. Yeah, Tommy Ryan, and he did work with the military, all that good stuff, did some training. Tommy, I had a video, I had a picture in the video of him at an older age there working with, I believe it was a military unit. You'll see it in the video there. So whomever who watches it, do check it out. I recommend. Alexander Cameron says Sarah was about 165, probably the best in the world in the late 1850s, was a diabetic in that at time, no treatments. He went downhill fast and died in around 1860. Oh, wow. Wow. Very interesting there. Very interesting. So, yeah, that's getting back to the mid 1800s right there, in certainly a world of bare knuckle. Good stuff there, Alex. Yeah, I'm gonna have to dive into it more. I had heard the names, but I don't know enough about that particular contest to dive into it. I'm going to look into it though there, because there's still a lot of stuff from the world of bare knuckle that I need to look into and learn myself there. Generally, it's pretty interesting. It's a crazy world. It's a world of its own, really. Shout out to Darren Dobson. I mentioned him before, but he has the Ungloved Era on Facebook. That's a good spot to get some knowledge and history of the bare knuckle world right there. Saul says nothing to do with the subject, but Civic LaMotta and Black Murderers Roar are so damn underrated. Yes, they are. They all were beasts. Hellas even said that Coco Kid, K.O. Robinson in sparring. Very interesting right there. Coco Kid, man, he had the type of competition and experience that I would say it's not far-fetched, man. Coco Kid had a lot of dang experience, crazy amount of fights. He was on this guy. I believe he had over 200 fights from an official standpoint that we have recorded just around there. Herbert Lewis Hardwick right there. Coco Kid, Puerto Rican fighter. Though I did see something recently saying that he might not have been Puerto Rican. I go with Puerto Rican, but I ran across an article or something alluding to him potentially not being Puerto Rican, which is very interesting. But that aside, hell of a fighter, Black Murderers Row by some standards. Some consider him the greatest of the Black Murderers Row fighters, and he deserves such mention. I posted a video in the community post of Lewis Kid Kaplan. He knocked off Lewis Kid Kaplan, basically sent Lewis Kid Kaplan into retirement, former world featherweight champion who fought at lightweight and was retired essentially by Coco Kid. I think that was his last contest, as a matter of fact. And he realized, you know what? It's time to hang it up. So, yeah, this long period he was holding both the welterweight and middleweight titles simultaneously. He never lost a fight there. Then, in reference to Tommy Ryan, Kid McCoy, Dan mentioned not fight Kid McCoy. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. As a matter of fact, Saul said a great 50-50 fight. Both styles were poisoning each other. Greb always had a problem with punchers, and every boxer had problems with Greb. No doubt about it. Alexander mentions Greb won the title from Johnny Wilson. Yes, Johnny Wilson. And Johnny Wilson ducked Greb for a long period of time, like literally ducked. Wanted no parts of Greb, but he eventually had to fight him. Johnny Wilson, decent fighter, no doubt. Decent fighter, but in the pantheon of world middleweight champions, just kind of, decent fighter, decent world middleweight champion there. But they wanted no parts of Greb, but he eventually got that shot right there, which is very interesting for sure. Let me see here real quick. I'm going to mention George. Well, I'm going to go back to that one. I'm going to say Charles Kid McCoy versus Tommy Ryan, March 2nd, 1896, since we were talking about it. And there's an asterisk there. Now, this fight went down. It's official. The reason I put an asterisk there is because, and you'll see it in the video, the reason this fight went down was because Tommy Ryan had some empathy for Charles Kid McCoy, who you could say was sort of his underling. He took under his wing, would spar with him, bring him into training camps, things of that nature. And that allowed for Charles Kid McCoy to learn a great deal there working with the champion. And when they fought, of course, Tommy Ryan was a world middleweight champion at the time. But that being said, they had been working together for a good little while with, you could say, Tommy Ryan showing him the ropes, probably even on the sort of back-end business side of boxing as well. Now, I put an asterisk there because the contest is official. It is what it is. The 15-round stoppage win for, 15-round KO for Charles Kid McCoy, March 2nd, 1896. Now, where the controversy comes in is freaking Charles Kid McCoy. You could say sneaky, sly. You could say scandalous. You could say in a backstabbing fashion. He came to Tommy Ryan and came to him in sort of like a manner in which he was going through a lot of issues outside of the ring, and he was dealing with some financial issues, and he needed a fight in order to essentially clear some of these bills, debts, or whatever he may have had. And Tommy Ryan, being empathetic and not even training at that particular time, showed that empathy and said, you know what, I'm going to give this fight to my friend, my compadre, my sparring mate, my training buddy, Charles Kid McCoy, because of the fact that I know he's a little bit down and out right now. He just is looking for an opportunity to make some money. And then, of course, the two names being matched together, we can kind of go at it. And then at the end of the day, it's going to be a boost for both of us. He's going to get money in his pocket. I'm going to get money in my pocket. Like Mike Tyson always said, hey, he gives a guy a shot, you know what I'm saying? Because this is prize fighting. They want to, hey, you don't want to deny another man an opportunity to make money. This is how they make their money and make their living. So that was the precipice in which Charles Kid McCoy came at Tommy Ryan. And Tommy Ryan agreed to this with an empathetic nature in mind. So he just was under the understanding that Tommy Ryan was hard on his luck, and came into the contest. So for Ryan, and you could argue, hey, his fault. He didn't assume that he was going to be fighting the best version of Tommy, or the best version of Charles Kid McCoy. And therefore he took the fight and the two fought. And it turned out Charles Kid McCoy had been in training. He had been getting himself prepped. He saw this as, you know what, this is a chance. I'm going to go in here with this divisive plan, and I'm going to see if he bites for what I'm stating. And Charles Kid McCoy this entire time had been freaking training for the contest. And he went into the contest with Tommy Ryan, who was essentially doing a favor for a friend. And ultimately, he went 100% hard, all out. Mind you, it went 15 rounds, and this being Tommy Ryan, not in the best of shape. Again, he's doing a favor for a friend. And if you think about boxing, that has happened over the years. I mean, a recent one is freaking Derek Chisora fought Tyson Fury for the world heavyweight title here. I think it's not last year, the year before, 2023. And Derek Chisora shouldn't have been fighting for the world heavyweight title. He was doing a favor for a friend, essentially. And Tommy Ryan ended up getting knocked out. This was the first time he actually lost, and the two became bitter rivals, pretty much enemies after that, which you can expect to be the case when someone essentially plays you like that. So I put an asterisk there. So it is controversial, but you could say, hey, that's on Tommy Ryan for assuming that he was just going into the run-of-the-mill contest where he was just, I guess, going to do rounds with Charles Kid McCoy. Or you can look at it from Charles Kid McCoy being very snake-like in terms of coming at Tommy Ryan as though he was just completely down and out on his luck and needed an opportunity to make money, and Tommy Ryan agreeing to it, knowing that the two had been friends up until that point, knowing that they had been in camps with each other. And Charles Kid McCoy, very interesting fighter right there. Of course, he was charged with the murder of his wife. Later on, this was after his career. So this dude had some freaking issues, no doubt about it. He definitely had some issues. But you have to have some issues to do that to someone you genuinely consider to be a friend. Very snakish right there. Very snakish. Let me check out the comments. Saul says another banger. Yes, indeed. But Tommy Ryan, as mentioned, went 15 rounds with him. Dan mentions Kid McCoy is one of the greatest fighters in history. Yes, no doubt. Kid McCoy, he was a hell of a fighter right there. So you have to understand the nature of essentially playing Tommy Ryan like a fiddle. It said that McCoy hated Ryan because he always trashed him in sparring. Yeah, there might have been some of that, and it was mention of such. McCoy at times was embarrassed in sparring because Ryan, master boxer, that's why one of the greatest fighters ever, one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated fighter ever. He was just technically superior in that sense. McCoy, hard-nosed guy, tough, you know what I'm saying? And he could box, of course, had a little pop to him, fought bigger guys, but Ryan was the better boxer. Cheers to my man, Historical Boxing Society. Be sure to go subscribe to Historical Boxing Society. Hey, I check out Historical Boxing Society, drop some good content there related to the history, especially around these particular time frames. So I think you will like it. Go check him out there, folks. He says, oh, I know what you're talking about. Nice. Old Kid McCoy tricks. No doubt about it there. Historical Boxing Society. If you're here and you can see, go subscribe to Historical Boxing Society right here, right now. If you're listening, go do so. 86 Boxing, we're here, boxing history every night. We're talking 1800s controversial fights. This is one of them right here. So thank you, Historical Boxing Society. So says, yeah, Dan was the beast too, punch like hell, even though it said he always looked slick, lanky, and weak. Yes, indeed, indeed. The real McCoy right there. I wanted to do a video on him. I haven't done him. He's on a list. Probably be a while before I get to him, but I like Charles Kid McCoy as far as the career profile and then the just sheer, I guess you could say, madness surrounding his overall life. Dan, but great fighter too, big puncher, corkscrew. Oh yes, indeed, there, Dan. So all the way up to heavyweight, good heavyweight. Yes, indeed. So said the only thing I didn't like about McCoy is that he was so dirty. Oh yeah, you definitely tie that to him. Saul says, Dan, yes, he was a master boxer that didn't know no mercy. He used the corkscrew punches to cut his opponents to ribbons. Oh yes, indeed, indeed. Historical Boxing Society. One of the greatest tragedies ever in boxing is the police intervention in their fight. Ryan was just starting to punish McCoy when police stepped in. Unfortunate, very unfortunate there. Historical Boxing Society. Appreciate you. Be sure to check them out, folks. Historical Boxing Society. Do go check him out for sure. I'm telling you, you'll like his content right there. As I mentioned with Random Acoustic Thoughts, same with Historical Boxing Society. I enjoy his content. He's doing some of the videos on some of the boxers that don't often get talked about, like these time periods and such. So if you're into that, which I know pretty much all of us here at this particular moment, maybe those that are listening now here on the replay, I think you're into it. So check out Historical Boxing Society. Appreciate you there, buddy. Dan says McCoy killed himself. Oh, that's how he went out. Unfortunately, he had some issues. Clearly, he had some issues mentally. Clearly, he had some mental issues there, probably in multiple ways, more ways than one. I got subscribed to you, Dan. Subscribe. Appreciate you there, Dan. Salute to you, Dan. Always showing some love. Saul says McCoy was so tricky. I remember seeing that Nat Fletcher had him as the best middleweight ever. Hey, not unbeknownst, hell of a middleweight right there. And that's saying something considering Nat Fleischer was around with the likes of Harry Greb, Stanley Ketchel, Les Darcy. Woo! I do think Les Darcy, man, as far as the running most underrated fighter ever, he's up there. One who I think would have been world middleweight champion, even if that meant facing Harry Greb. And I wish that fight would have happened. It's so unfortunate. He's an unfortunate story as well. There's videos on the channel that go over Les Darcy. So check out the Les Darcy video on the channel. Very unfortunate situation there as well. But a great, great, great middleweight. So you really know your stuff. Yes, indeed there. Saul, appreciate you, Saul, sharing some stuff. In cyberboxing, if I call it right, he said that he was so damn fast, Clifford had cat-like reflexes. Indeed. Indeed, Dan mentioned BTR Boxing does a great documentary on Kid McCoy. Hey, I was listening to them not too long ago. As in the last 2 weeks, I've been listening to a couple of their things. So that's good stuff. I'm going to check that one out on Kid McCoy there. Because as mentioned, I haven't done anything on McCoy. I know some little small tidbits and things about him, but great fighter, great middleweight, of course. I want to learn more. But what better way than to show some love with some of the others that are there. Here, real quick, let's go ahead and move on. I'm going back to George LeBlanc versus Nonpareil Jack Dempsey, August 27th, 1889. Now, we've talked about this fight before. This is the fight in which George LeBlanc became the first man to defeat Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. Then the Nonpareil, that means, or a Nonpareil, it means unrivaled. So there were those that felt that he could not be beat. This being Nonpareil Jack Dempsey there in his prime, many felt that he could not be beat. And certainly in the case of George LeBlanc, that was not in a fair manner. And I'll tell you why here. But I wanted to say that Nonpareil Jack Dempsey at one point during his career, which ran parallel to that of John L. Sullivan, was a man that rivaled John L. Sullivan in popularity. You could argue that if John L. Sullivan was the number one most popular guy, then certainly number two or 1B was Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. He had that much backing associated with him. Born in Ireland, one of the great Irish fighters, arguably the greatest Irish fighter. Technically sound, astute to the game, very technical boxer. But that being said, don't let that fool you. He fought bare knuckled. He fought with skin tight gloves on, all of that good stuff. There's a video on the channel on him, but I don't think it does him his proper justice. I need to do something bigger and greater on Nonpareil Jack Dempsey because I think that he deserves that just due. But that being said, Nonpareil Jack Dempsey versus George LeBlanc. What happened in that contest is after they were fighting, they were going on there. You saw 32 rounds, and Nonpareil Jack Dempsey was not only lost for the first time, but he was knocked out by what was deemed to be the pivot punch. It's got its name. So what that is spinning back fist. You see that in MMA. You can still use that in MMA, but it was banned from boxing primarily because of the fact that George LeBlanc did this to Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. Just think about a boxer doing a spinning back fist and knocking out an opponent. That's what happened in this contest, what made it so controversial there. George LeBlanc used a spinning back fist, aka the pivot punch, which was banned from boxing or has been banned from boxing. And that's how he was able to get a nod over Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. Of course, they fought twice, and Dempsey did beat him. So this was just the first time that Dempsey had actually lost the contest. And interestingly enough, Dempsey's final fight was against Tommy Ryan. Now, Dempsey, he died of tuberculosis, and I know I've mentioned that. And with that, he was dealing with tuberculosis at the time that he fought Tommy Ryan. There's no question because he had multiple bouts with tuberculosis. I don't know all the particulars of how that affects the body, but it really does a number on the immune system for sure. And we know there have been a number of boxers that have died from it. We spoke about it on this channel. I'm going to do a video just kind of talking about some of the others who've died from it. Some very high-profile names in the sport. Some even after their career, but some in the midst of their career, like Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. He was, I need to look this up because I always forget to look it up. Around 32, 33, or 34, somewhere in there. But this was a guy who still had a lot of fight left in him. And the crazy thing is we would have seen him on film too. I'm pretty positive that we would have seen Nonpareil Jack Dempsey on film had not he died. It's very unfortunate. Had not he died, we would have most certainly seen him on film because he would have been one of those astute connoisseurs of the game that would have been great to have on film, and I think that would have been understood by the powers that be, that coupled with his popularity from an overall perspective there. So it's very unfortunate. But George LeBlanc got a nod over him using an illegal punch. Now, I don't know that it was necessarily illegal at the time, but you could argue unforeseen, probably illegal. I had to look into the particulars surrounding such, but generally an illegal punch that was eventually banned from the sport. And that's how Nonpareil Jack Dempsey took his first L, the unrivaled one. Saul says, Darren, thank you, man. You know, tell us about the business too. The OG boxer were from another world. Indeed, there's indeed. Saul says that Nonpareil Nick always goes so hands. yes, indeed. Yeah, one of the great nicknames. Just think about that, Nonpareil Jack Dempsey. Most people think about, of course, William Harrison Dempsey, but do not forget about the Nonpareil because that was the original in the world of Dempsey's there. Historical Boxing Society says LeBlanc was kind of a real prick. Frank Childs almost killed him. The bout ended. After the bout ended. Oh, yes, I remember that. It said police saved LeBlanc's life. If I remember This was this a disqualification or something crazy that went down? I need to look back into it, but I think I know what you're talking about there. Yeah, LeBlanc was a prick. Now, he was a Marine. He's from Canada. He was a Canadian Marine. And, yeah, he had a temper on him. And he could box. He could fight. You know what I'm saying? But, yeah, real, I guess you can say, prick, as you can say, historical boxing society. You got to think of it from that standpoint. That's a good way of putting it right there. So imagine just dealing with a guy like that. It's interesting, insane. Why was the backhand banned? Yes, I think it's not tied to the rule set in terms of how the initial rule set was sort of documented and how it was meant to be orchestrated. The backhand that was outside the norms of what was considered to be the official combat means as it related to the sport of boxing right there. So when you throw in that backhand, that was taking it to a different level. That's my best bet right there. I had to look into particulars that would be outside of that, but that's my general understanding right there. When you look at some of the original rule sets of boxing, especially thinking about it from the transition to the Marquess of Queensberry rule and the notion of punching with a closed fist there with the sort of broad side of the hand, essentially, then that kind of is counter to it, you know, doing sort of back fisting towards that. And of course, it's illegal to this day. So it says, without that backhand, could Nonpareil had won the fight? Do you know who was winning? I'm trying to remember if I mentioned it in the video. I believe that Nonpareil was likely winning the fight. It was up there in rounds, as mentioned. Nonpareil, he was one of those guys who wasn't a one-punch knockout artist, but he could outbox you. So he would eventually, you know, he was used to going rounds. He went beyond 32 rounds, of course. So he'd eventually get to you, and his skill would prevail, especially when the attrition comes in. You start to get sloppy. So I think that was understood by LeBlanc because Nonpareil had already beat him. I believe it was beforehand. Yeah, Nonpareil had already beat him before, so he knew the situation at hand. So from what I recall, yeah, and I had to look back on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Nonpareil was, of course, the guy ahead in that particular contest. Very interesting, right? What a coward ending the fight with an illegal blow reminds me of Ward versus Kovalev with his body shots. Interesting right there. Hey, let's dig it in there. That's another story right there. So certainly another story. Real quick, let me see here. I'm going to jump to Tom Sharkey versus Bob Fitzsimmons, DQ 9, December 2nd, 1896. Now, this is the one where Bob Fitzsimmons and Tom Sharkey, this was their first fight. 1889. Oh, look, let me see what's that. 1896. Yeah, 1896. December 2nd, 1896. This was their first fight. And I have a video of both on the channel. Goes into this. And I did a shorts video on it, I believe, as well. But basically, the referee, we talked about it before. The referee in this contest was Wyatt Earp, the gunslinger. Pecos Bill, bang, Pecos Bill, bang, ooh, Pecos Bill, bang, bang. But Wyatt Earp, gunslinger of the Wild Wild West fame, and apparently there is a show on Netflix. I've seen it. Well, I haven't seen the show. I've seen the sort of little poster and trailer for it, actually. But Wyatt Earp had the show that kind of speaks to the story of him and his family and what led him to be. But of course, he's involved with boxing, and he was a referee for this contest. Now, he did have money on Tom Sharkey getting the victory. So in this particular contest, Bob Fitzsimmons had actually knocked out, or what would have been deemed a knockout, of Tom Sharkey, and Wyatt Earp ended up ruling it a disqualification loss for Bob Fitzsimmons. And of course, this was met with a ton of controversy. As a matter of fact, the two ended up in court I mentioned that in the video, maybe both videos, or certainly one of the videos that is on the channel, but the two ended up being in a court battle. But the court did not rule in favor of Bob Fitzsimmons, even though there was compelling evidence there that this was rigged by Wyatt Earp, who had, as mentioned, money on Tom Sharkey winning this contest. Is very unfortunate right there. Now, of course, Bob Fitzsimmons would go on to avenge this and knock him out. But in this particular contest, from what I recall, of course, Bob Fitzsimmons was getting the better of Tom Sharkey, a hell of a fighter, a hell of a puncher as well. And the two, or what I would say is Tom Sharkey ended up getting what should have been a knockout. Even the crowd was aware and knew of it. Or getting knocked out, and the crowd was aware and knew of it. But it was turned over. Now, when Tom Sharkey went to the back, he wouldn't allow any of the doctors or anything to check him in relation to what was deemed to be a foul punch or whatnot. And therefore, there was a lot of controversy. Still, the verdict was still out. Was this actually a clean knockout that was ruled a disqualification? It turned out that was the case. And there was indication that Tom Sharkey even knew beforehand that this was the case right here. So that was an unfortunate one. We've talked about it on the channel before, but Tom Sharkey, a hell of a puncher, big puncher. Well, him and Bob Fitzsimmons both realistically. But the better fighter, definitely Bob Fitzsimmons. Is unfortunate. Bob Fitzsimmons was screwed over by Tom Sharkey, and then to not be able to get the verdict there in court. Two went to court, couldn't get the verdict, knowing that Wyatt Earp wasn't necessarily an upstanding guy in that sense, makes it even more unfortunate. The banger ruined by bets. Yes, indeed, there. Historical Boxing Society. This is a great story. This bout. Yes, indeed. Indeed. So said, same thing happened to me with McCoy, but this time, or same thing that happened to me with McCoy this time with Sharkey. He was a hell of a fighter, powerful brawler, but he was so damn dirty. He beat Mike Twin Sullivan or Jack Root, if I recall it right. Okay, got you there in terms of Tom Sharkey. Yeah, I can't remember if it was Mike. Could have been Root, one of the two. I've gone through his stuff, of course. I did a video on him. I had to look back. But yeah, dirty fighter, no doubt about it. Tom Sharkey, definitely dirty fighter. He would pull some tricks of the trade. He has one of my favorite, most iconic pictures in boxing when you see him there with his cauliflower ear, just looking like he just freaking came through a meat grinder or whatnot. The fighting sailor there, the fighting Marine even mentioned from Dundalk Island there, freaking the hard-hitting Tom Sharkey with a takedown that made him hit the back of his head. Oh, yeah, that was in there too, huh? Very interesting, right? Crazy stuff. Alexander mentions a strong case can be made that Ruby Robert that thumped Dipsy was the Dipsy as greatest middleweight. No, I agree with you. I agree with you right there. Alex, no doubt about it. Yeah, when you think about the greatest middleweights of all time, no doubt Bob Fitzsimmons should be on that list. As a matter of fact, if you ask me, who I had number one, it would be Ruby Robert right there, Alexander Campbell. So you are 100% correct. Historical Boxing Society says 23-year-old Sharkey versus 33-year-old Fitz. Yeah, that's crazy. So Fitz, he's one of the great older fighters as well. You know, he would go on to do great things even at an older age. It's pretty interesting that Fitz, he won the world middleweight title, then the world heavyweight title, and then the world lightweight title. First three-weight world champion. But just think about that. Middleweight, heavyweight, light heavyweight. And, of course, he was older there. One of the greatest older fighters. I say Archie Moore is number one, but that certainly Fitzsimmons gives him a run for the money right there. Certainly, you know, you can see it either way. It depends on, you know, your cup of tea right there. Both of them great fighters. Alexander, the crowd went to rush the ring. However, Wyatt was healed. Yes, indeed. Hey, Wyatt, he got stopped. I mentioned it in the video, but he had like a Colt 45. It was like the actual gun. It was like a foot-long pistol, as a matter of fact. I think it was a 6-shooter that was confiscated at the beginning of the contest, and he ended up getting arrested in the aftermath because of having this pistol, which is crazy. Just think about, hey, just imagine that today, right? Imagine that today, just crazy. Just shows you how kind of things were then. The times were most certainly different. Rigged fights were since the start. Damn, yes indeed, there, Saul. Yes indeed. Oh, that hit goes so damn hard. Dude, for real, all bruising with the cauliflower ear. Yes indeed. Saul says, Cyberboxing says that Sharkey was a smaller and tougher Marciano. Damn, if Fitz did that to Sharkey, I wonder what he could have done to Marciano. Would have been very interesting. Now, Marciano would have certainly been all over him, so you never know. It could have been tough for him, like James J. Jeffries, where the endurance came into the fold there. Not that Sharkey didn't have it, but to the likes of a James J. Jeffrey and Marciano, that's a different notch right there as far as their overall endurance. So that would have troubled Fitch there, I would think. Just thinking about the Marciano aspect of it, because Marciano, he's one of those that just never stopped right there. And the thing that sort of derailed Fitch against Jeffrey, certainly in that first fight, was the attrition as the rounds were on there. And I think that could have been the case in dealing with the likes of a Marciano, who, while would have been shorter, would have had more girth, because Fitz was certainly slender. Hey, and Fitz likely would have caught him with some things. But that being said, would have been hard to keep Marciano off. Stylistically, might have been a tough one there, though Fitz would certainly be in the game, no doubt. Alexander said Fitz was only 167 when he stopped Corbett, which is crazy, right? Pretty freaking amazing thinking about that. Caught him with that body shot, a left hook to the body. Sent him, oh, it's great that we have that on film, folks. Go look it up. We have it on film. Alexander's camera, I never go out without being healed. In Indiana, there's open carry. Got you there, Alex. Got you there. Hey, you got to let it be known. Good stuff. So it says, without any Fitzsimmons would have slept Sharkey, I have no doubt. No doubt about it. He had, for all intents and purposes, done such or enough to keep him down for the count. But some BS there on the side of Wyatt Earp. I thought about doing a video on Wyatt Earp. I haven't got around to doing it, but I thought about doing one. I think it would just be an interesting one to add to the mix there. All right, lastly, the last one I'll talk about here in this particular juncture is James J. Corbett. His no contest with the Black Prince Peter Jackson on May 21st, 1891. This is an interesting one. Someone brought this up. I don't remember if it was Josh Taylor or what. Historical box side said, yes, Fitz had the match won. Yes, indeed. There, HBS. Subscribe to HBS, folks, as mentioned. But yeah, this one right here, there's no contest. 61 rounder with James J. Corbett and the Black Prince Peter Jackson. Two of the formidable heavyweights of the 1890s and so forth. But it's really the 1890s work that or late 1800s work that you would look at for both of them, because of the fact that when Corbett won the title, he kind of went more Hollywood, mainstream, but that was not uncommon during that particular time. Certainly another banger there, as Saul mentions. Now, I meant to, or at least a part of me wanted to look up the particulars of this fight again, just to kind of speak on it. Someone mentioned it earlier. I don't know if it was Josh or Saul or someone, but basically you have different iterations or variations of what went down in this contest. It said that Peter Jackson came into the contest ill, and therefore he wasn't at his best. By that same token, the contest in itself ended up being a draw after 61 rounds, or at least it was ruled a draw. You have some accounts that say that Corbett got the better of Peter Jackson. You have some accounts that say Peter Jackson got the better of Corbett. I would have to look back to see how I accounted for it in the videos that I have on the channel of the two. This being the animated videos, and these were early on. I would have to look back, but I might have geared it in favor of the account that was associated with Peter Jackson, because there was some indication that it was ruled a draw when it could have certainly gone in Jackson's favor. And it was high stakes, of course, with the winner essentially going on to face John L. Sullivan. It was purported to be that whomever won it would have been the one that faced John L. Sullivan, but it ended up being a draw. Of course, that throws a damper into things in the sense that the winner would go on to face him. But we all know with history that it ended up being James J. Corbett, and we know what happened there. Now, regardless of the situation, it would have been the same Sullivan, and both of these guys were better conditioned, more primed for dealing with John L. Sullivan at that particular time. And Peter Jackson was on a hell of a run, I'll tell you that. He scooped up the colored world heavyweight title, the British world heavyweight title there, I think the Commonwealth, some other like regional titles. Oh yeah, the Australian heavyweight title. He knocked off Frank Slavin to get that. He knocked off the Irish giant Peter Marr in Ireland en route to getting to the 1892 time frame. I can't remember exactly when that was, but this was 1891 when this happened. He might have knocked off Peter Marr 1899 it might have been. But he was on a hell of a run. I just know that. He was on one hell of an actual run there, a deeper run than that of James J. Corbett, who doesn't have a ton of fights. I mentioned this earlier. He doesn't have he's got like 20-ish, somewhere around 20-something, the low 20s in total career fights from an official standpoint, though he did have exhibitions and appearances and all that stuff. Like if you look on Cyber Boxing Zone, you'll see a ton of some of those extra exhibitions and such that don't get reported, of course, on BoxRec, for instance. But that being said, hey, two top tier heavyweights from that particular time. Pretty crazy thinking about it. Historical Boxing Society, I can find this about the most controversial of all fights because of how it's incorrectly viewed. Yes, indeed, they're Historical Boxing Society. Indeed there. Thanks for sharing. Alexander, read Pollock's Corbett book and you'll get an unbiased, balanced account of the Corbett Jackson. Okay, good stuff there, Alex. Good stuff. Oh, Pollock. Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about Pollock. I need to chat with him or something. Maybe set up something right there. I want to definitely get to those. Corbett put a beating on Jackson's rib, busted him up. Okay, hear you there, Alex. I hear you for sure. And Historical Boxing Society says anyone who knows the famous injury that Jackson got in this bout, which the greatest distort how it's viewed. Okay. So yeah, injury. Yeah, that I guess that kind of ties into it. You know, this might warrant just a show on its own to dive in this particular contest. And that's probably what I'll do here. Set up something where we can dive into this in particular. But certainly, you think about it, pre-1900s, one of the more controversial fights there, just given the magnitude of the contest for both of these competitors. Both of them great fighters, great heavyweights. Both of them still had amazing careers just from an overall standpoint and are certainly some of the bigger names in the game as far as fighters during that period, and definitely the heavyweight division, which is the division. But 61 rounds, imagine that, these two battling it out for 61 rounds. I mean, that's almost unheard of. 61 rounds, these two. And very different body types as well. Corbett he was a more slender guy. He had he was about 190. Jackson about 200, 205, 210. He could get her in those ranges. So just imagine that. Hey, both could do their thing there for sure. So it ended up being a no contest is what it was ultimately ruled, but still some things up in the air as far as who deserved that verdict. We've heard some different things mentioned here. And maybe rightfully so, it was a rule to no contest. But as mentioned, history showed that it would be Corbett who would go on to get the title or get the shot at Sullivan, and he won the world heavyweight title. Now he was supposed to fight a rematch with Peter Jackson, but that never materialized. Corbett said he would, but he never did do it. And that would have been a hell of a fight. One of the biggest fights. They might have been touting it as the fight of the century had it happened there in the aftermath of such. But ultimately, we didn't get it. Historical Boxing Society says, so in round 30, Peter Jackson got a broken ankle. So 30 rounds, Corbett bounced around him, unable to move, while Corbett just stabbed him. All right, Jackson just owned him when he had 2 feet working. Got you there, Historical Boxing Society. So you see there, hey, good information there, HBS right there. That makes sense in terms of sharing that. Very good, interesting information. I think this one warrants a discussion on its own because I want to dive back into it. I've did some videos on both of them, but I think this warrants a deeper dive, and I think some others have mentioned this before. At least one other person for sure. May have been multiple mentioned doing a deeper dive on this particular contest. So that might actually happen here. So I'm going to see when we can get that in place. But in the meantime, that's the list in terms of what I had here today. We talked John L. Sullivan, Patty Ryan, Dominic McCaffrey, Jack McCullough, Jim Carney, George LaBlanche, Don Perel, Jack Dempsey, Charles Kidd McCoy, Tommy Ryan, Tom Sharkey, Bob Fitzsimmons, James J. Corbett, and of course the Black Prince, Peter Jackson. So that's pretty amazing. All right. So, man, we've gone for hour 46, almost 2 hours. I meant to do it for like 1 hour, but it was just good discussion and everything to have that discussion with everyone. So real quick, let me listen to Jackson Corbett fight. Hey, so not a 100% accurate one there, Saul. I had started this, and then Josh Taylor, if y'all could pick a legend from the 1800s, who you pick the train with or under. That's a very interesting one. Maybe the likes of Tommy Ryan or Denver Ed Martin. Those two would come to mind there. But, man, I appreciate everyone dropping in for sure. Historical Boxing Society says, I'll rewatch the rest of the video. Good stuff. Appreciate you there. I'm going to be checking out your stuff there, buddy. Be sure to go check out Historical Boxing Society, folks. Subscribe if you can. Hey, like the channel, like this video or whatever it may be. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. If you're new and listening now, subscribe. But I appreciate every single one of you that dropped by to show some love here as we went through this process. And we will be back next Wednesday. If we can get something else in, we'll do that as well. But check out the latest video that I dropped as well. But thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your night. If I don't get with you, enjoy the rest of your weekend. We do have boxing action pretty much every weekend going down, but boxing history is where it's at, folks. So never forget, remember, history is for the living. So we're going to continue to show love to these historic greats there. Thank you to all who attended. Historical Boxing Society, Saul, Alex, Dan, Raul, Rodolfo, Chris, you name it. Oh, yeah, Josh Taylor, you name it. Appreciate you all there for sure. Hey, and have a good rest of your night, folks. Enjoy.